Imagine that you're out late at dinner, and under the darkness of night, a burglar, clad in black, eyes peering out from behind his ski mask, breaks into your home. As part of the havoc that the criminal wreaks, he rips an expensive painting of a pig off of your wall, smashing it over his knee, destroying your precious artwork. The charge for this terrible act of vandalism: criminal property destruction. Now imagine that same night, just an hour away from your home, a pork factory operator, clad in rubber boots and blue jeans, notices a piglet who isn't growing as fast as her siblings. Casually, he lifts her up by a back leg, high above his head, and then smashes her face against the concrete floor, killing her in the process, throwing her body into a trash can. The charge for this terrible act of violence? Nothing. Because such behavior is standard operating practice on factory farms across America, explicitly approved by industry officials and allowed by law. You see, farm animals have so little legal protection that smashing an inanimate painting of a pig can get you in greater legal trouble than smashing an actual living, feeling pig. Abraham Lincoln observed that nearly all of us can withstand adversity, but if you want to truly test someone's character, give him power. Well, in our relationship with the animals with whom we share this planet, we hold enormous power over them, yet we don't always wield that power so responsibly. If Lincoln was right, and I believe he was, then animals present us with a profound test of our character. Because how we treat those who are at our mercy, those who can't defend themselves, those over whom we have total control, often speaks greater volume about us than just about anything else. And when it comes to this test that animals present us, often humanity has been less than humane. If we want a new eyeliner, it's perfectly legal in America to immobilize rabbits and force toxic chemicals into their eyes. If we want entertainment, it's perfectly legal to beat wild animals into submission and force them to perform tricks for us in circuses. And if we want a new winter coat, it's perfectly legal to go into the forest, trap and kill free living animals to take their fur, even when we have perfectly warm, nonviolent alternatives available to us. Now, don't get me wrong. I am not suggesting that we don't care about animals. Far from it. Most of us are good people. We care about others, including animals. We can just put it to the test. Raise your hand if you support the humane treatment of animals. Okay? We'll do it even further. Keep your hand up if you would go out of your way to avoid causing an animal to suffer. As you can see, simply put, our society's actual treatment of animals often just doesn't align with the true values of fairness and compassion that most of us already hold today. Just think about it. Our nation is filled with animal lovers. We let our dogs sleep in bed with us. Just ask any cat person who the real owner is in the relationship. And let's be honest, how many of you are planning on buying your pets holiday gifts this winter? Don't worry, I'm not judging. I'm buying those same gifts too. So, how did this come to be? How did it come to pass that our relationship with animals got so out of whack? Most of us love animals. We cherish them so much that we consider some of them members of our families. Yet at the same time, our society treats some animals as if they were unfeeling commodities whose sole purpose on earth was to serve us for virtually any reason, regardless of how trivial that reason may be or how much suffering it may cause them. In some ways, our society has stumbled when it comes to our relationship with animals. We've gone down the wrong path, not because most of us want to harm animals, but because the abuses that are committed against animals are typically hidden from us by design so that you can't see them. Can you imagine a fur farm offering you a tour? Or a circus welcoming you in to watch the animals' training session? Or a slaughterhouse with glass walls? Those who engage in such enterprises know that it would be very difficult for you to bear witness to such violence against animals were you to see it with your own eyes. That's why they not only go to such great lengths to conceal their activities from us, they even want to make it a crime to take a photograph of what they're doing. That's right. The meat and dairy lobbies, for example, seek to pass laws known as ag-gag laws that would criminalize not the abuse of animals on factory farms, but rather would criminalize the whistleblower for merely taking a photograph of that abuse. Now, I can see the looks on your faces. Many of you seem shocked that this is being hidden from you. Trust me, I felt the same way that you do when I first learned just how desperate some in the animal use industries are to hide their practices from us. Naturally, that piqued my own curiosity, and I wanted to see with my own eyes. So, I made a decision that changed my life. I decided to visit an egg factory. My friends and I drove a couple hours away from where we lived at the time. We didn't know much about where we were going. All we knew was that there were 800,000 birds confined at this operation. It's relatively small for a modern egg operation. As we were driving out, minutes before seeing our destination, we smelled it. A thick odor of ammonia began penetrating the car windows, burning our lungs. And when we finally arrived, you might not even know that you were even in the right place. There were no animals to be seen anywhere. Long windowless warehouses stood before us. If it weren't for the stench in the air, you would have no idea that animals, let alone nearly 1 million of them, called this facility home. And once we walked inside that egg factory, what we saw bore no resemblance to the bucolic images we see on egg cartons and supermarket shelves. Rather, we found birds confined in cages so overcrowded that they couldn't even spread their wings, each animal having less space than a single sheet of paper on which to live. This is a battery cage. In the egg industry, it's typical to lock half a dozen birds inside of one of these cages for more than a year before they're slaughtered. It's difficult to imagine, yet this is how most eggs in our country are produced. And as we walked amongst these birds, photographing and videotaping their plight, one hen in particular caught my attention. She was forced into the back corner of her cage, other birds jammed up against her body, pressing her face against the cage wires. Unable even to move an inch, she stared back up at me, and I began wondering, what if she was my dog in that cage? What would I do then? After all, scientists tell us that, just like the dogs and cats who we welcome into our families, chickens are social, intelligent individuals. They have good memories, they plan for the future, they even have different communications to convey different kinds of threats that they face to one another. But for this one bird, staring back up at me, unable to free herself from the hell in which she found herself, the threat that she faced from us was one about which she could do nothing. I continued my wondering, what did she do to deserve this fate? What crime did she commit? After all, we don't take the most heinous criminals in our society, murderers and rapists, and put them in prison cells so overcrowded they're literally touching each other at all times, unable even to lift their arms. Yet what crime have the chickens and the pigs in our nation's egg and pork factories committed to deserve life in these kinds of cages? And the answer, of course, is nothing. The only crime these animals have committed is the crime of being born into the wrong species. But there is good news, because you see, this type of animal abuse that I witnessed at that egg factory, though sadly still prevalent, represents an antiquated worldview, one that most of us no longer hold today. The old view that animals are here merely for us is now gradually being replaced by a new view that animals are here with us. And the changes from this shift in perspective are all around. Where in the past, blood sports like cockfighting and dogfighting used to be legal in much of America, today they're banned in all 50 states. Today, many of the most popular circuses in our country are those that use no animals and instead rely on the amazing talents of their human performers. And those circuses that do grasp onto the old view and continue exploiting wildlife are simply going out of business as fewer customers show up and more laws are enacted to ban such abuse. And perhaps in the single greatest evidence that our societal perspective on animals is shifting, in every single state that has voted on a ballot measure to ease the confinement of farm animals, whether a red state like Arizona, or a blue state like Massachusetts, or a swing state like Florida, by double-digit margins, voters have overwhelmingly enacted such farm animal protection measures. In addition to our public policies, many of us are starting to make changes in our personal lives that better reflect the humane values that most of us already hold today. For example, who amongst us has friends who are perhaps trying meatless Mondays, or maybe they're trying to incorporate more plant-based meals throughout their week? Or maybe you even know some people who are going whole hog or really no hog and enjoying plant-based meals all the time. It turns out that this dietary change, eating less meat, not only spares animals' lives, but it's the very advice that public health experts recommend to us to lengthen our own lives as well. Now, of course, there is still a long way to go before our society's actual treatment of animals aligns with the true values of kindness and compassion that most of us already hold today. But as you can see, things are changing, and those changes are palpable. Hundreds of years ago, Galileo and Copernicus helped us to understand that we are not the center of the physical universe. Today, our perspective is shifting yet again as we begin to recognize that maybe humans don't solely occupy the center of the moral universe either. And that change in perspective is with good reason, because the old view never really did represent us that well anyway. This is not who we are. This does not reflect our values. It doesn't reflect us. We are better than this. A culture in which we abuse our power over animals is not the kind of world most of us want to live in. Yet in spite of that, institutionalized animal abuse still routinely occurs, largely because we don't know about it. But increasingly, just like I did at that egg factory, we are finding out, and that knowledge is changing the human-animal relationship. We are beginning to embrace a kinder, less violent view of animals, one that doesn't hold that a painting of a pig is of greater value than an actual pig. In our humanity, we are beginning to embody the true humaneness that most of us already hold today. So, here's my question for each of us. What will we do to pass Lincoln's test and prove that we are indeed capable of using the power that we hold over animals responsibly? What will we do to ensure that the true values we hold, of supporting the humane treatment of those who are vulnerable, of avoiding causing them to suffer, are reflected in our everyday lives? Are we willing to find new ways of clothing and entertaining ourselves that don't rely on the exploitation of animals? Are we willing to change our diets? I think we are, because we are better than how we treat animals. It's not new values that we need in order to build the kind of world most of us want to live in. As we've seen, most of us already share the right values. Rather, simply by living up to those values that we already hold in our everyday lives, each of us can help create a more humane society. Thank you.